start right now, or are we starting at 6:30?
I think we can go.
Okay. All right, good evening and welcome everyone to the City of River Falls Municipal Utility Advisory Board meeting for Monday, September 19th, 2022. Kevin, could we please have a roll call?
Sure. Toom?
Here.
Spafford? Here. Wells Mangold?
Here.
Girl?
Here.
Lick? Chris Lick? He was on in Tennessee at a hotel. John is checking. Let's come back to him. Carol?
Here.
Okay, we're just going to wait to see if I see John scrambling in the production center. Is he raising his hand or something?
Nope. Chris, are you there?
So I will mark Chris as a question mark maybe. If he checks in, we'll mark him present. How about that?
Lene now. She just got in.
Okay. So Lene, we just did roll call, and we have everybody's present except for Chris at this point. And he may join.
Thanks, Kevin. I just got back on.
Yep. Very good, Kellen.
Okay, looking for approval of the minutes from the UAB meeting on August 15th. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Can I have any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. At this time, calling for any public comments. Please come to the microphone, state your name, your address, so on and so forth.
Good evening. My name is Patricia LaRue. I live at 489 Marcella Court. In less than a year, the Junction Falls Hydro will receive its license renewal. This has been a long, hard slog with twists and turns and lots of attention. But now we're finally this close. And as we just are about to realize the reward of this 9-year journey, I learned that the city has entered into talks with the Army Corps of Engineers to tear out Junction Falls Dam in the near future while leaving Powell Falls Dam for later demolition. This is not acceptable. I talked to the Army Corps. The Army Corps stated they are required to consider all alternative plans. And I suppose it's kind of weird for you guys that you're going to hear an alternative plan before you formally hear the real plan, but there's nothing about this that has been normal anyway. So almost 2 years ago to the day, the city made the decision to drain Lake Louise. I remember Mark Spafford asking, but what's the plan? There was none. There was no mitigation measures put into place before opening the waste gate. After the lake drained, Peter Hogg estimated that 5,000 cubic yards of sediment moved from Lake Louise into the lower Kinni. Turtles died from loss of winter habitat. Once the lake bed drained was exposed, Peter Hogg gave us a damage report. He said 3 things needed to happen in the near future. We needed to remove the 5,000 cubic yards of sediment that went into the lower Kinni. We needed to remove approximately 22,000 cubic yards of sediment from the riverbanks to avoid future collapse into the river, and we needed to remove the abandoned sewer pipe no longer protected by the lake. Our $1 million state grant should be used to be used for this immediate groundwork that has been long overdue and not done. But this is where the Army Corps grant could come in. The grant is a cost-sharing $10 million grant. We have so far paid $120,000 for a dam removal study, $40,000 for a downstream sediment study, and $40,000 for a mussel study, just to name a few. The dam is not scheduled to be removed until 2026. We have 3 to 4 years to get it done. First, the Powell Falls Dam area. The Corps grant money could be used to deliberative dam removal lake restoration, and doing something with the city's property that used to be Lake Louise. 2, in nobody's universe are we going to be allowed to move forward with any plan, dams or no dams, without removing sediment in Lake George. We have been talking about this since the dam was reconstructed in 1990, but have done nothing. It's time. Use the Corps grant to remove Lake George sediment. I propose we add bubblers to the lake for aeration, algae mitigation, and for the benefit of the trout. A fountain for aesthetic interest, and it would be a great attraction to the lake. In addition, about 30 feet behind the Junction Falls Dam is the 122-year-old rock crib and timber dam, the Lake George Dam. It's about 30 feet between the two of them, and between that is a crap load of sediment, car tires, you name it. It's filled like a dumpster. That whole area needs to be cleaned out. It would be really cool and historic to remove the Lake George Dam and reassemble it, perhaps at the Lake Louise area, as part of our heritage of being the first hydroelectric powered town in the region. Phase 3, the Corps grant money could be used to utilize and upgrade our stormwater system and to protect the river. Now, using the Corps grant money in these ways makes sense. The Engage River Falls. For the past year, we have asked community to answer surveys, attend open houses, visit pop-up events, and listen to focus groups. The information from the community shows a respect for Lake George, its biodiversity, and the renewable energy from hydropower generation. 33% of the participants who talked about where they want to walk said around Lake George Park pathways. Another group indicated they like to go down below the dam. Our hydropower generation is mentioned multiple times in participant comments. Kayakers. It makes more sense for us to promote kayaking in the river above the city so that the kayak journey ends in Lake George. The kayaker travels 2 hours above the city, empties into the lake with a water fountain, a proper landing area, and access to our business establishments within a block of their ride's end. It is a much better result than kayakers going down to the lower Kinni and getting out of the river somewhere between Hudson and Prescott. 3, the ratepayers. The ratepayers have paid a ton of money and time into the Powell Falls Dam removal. We cannot use any of the $1 million state grant or $10 million Army Corps grant to repay what the ratepayers have already spent to remove Lake George Dam, Powell Dam. The one way we can make those funds back is by generating hydroelectricity. If you take out Junction Falls Dam, the city loses the pilot funds, the revenues, and a way to make our ratepayers whole. Generating hydroelectricity benefits every single ratepayer. Hydropower offsets what we purchase from WIPI. The Junction Falls electricity is generated just 4 blocks from where you're sitting right now. That electricity goes directly from the generator onto the feeder and into our homes. For every kilowatt hour we use, we pay the utilities 11.1 cents. Now that may not sound like much, but that adds up to $150,000 in revenues last year and $92,000 year to date. Those funds go back to repaying each customer for the cost of removing Powell Falls Dam. If the Army Corps agrees to leave Junction Falls Dam in place, we won't have to address the structure issues of supporting the Winter Street Bridge, the pedestrian bridge, or the Maple Street Bridge. These bridges were engineered and built with a dam in place. The dam may not be flood control, but it does slow down flood waters. Finally, the reason to keep the Junction Falls Dam is renewable energy. I believe Mike Noreen indicated approximately 16% of the city's ratepayers voluntarily purchase green blocks of energy. If you review the raw data we are getting from Engage RF, you will see large numbers of people are proud of our city's focus on renewable energy and mention our hydro generation by name. Our hydro production far surpasses our solar production and benefits every River Falls municipal utility customer. Every minute of every day, Christmas and New Year's included, not just May through October during the daylight hours of fishing season. As a renewable energy conscious people put more and more solar panels on their roofs, the utilities lose those kilowatt dollars. However, the same renewable conscious energy people would just as soon be paying the utilities 11.1 cents per kilowatt hour for hydropower and know their money is going to purchase green energy. I thank you. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Patricia. Anyone else? All right, moving on. Moving on to the consent agenda and acknowledgement of the meetings from the West Central Wisconsin Biosolids Facility Commission on August 18th, 2022. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Moving on to new business item number 3 is the resolution approving the contract for the North Loop. Kevin?
Yes, we did get bids in for the North Loop project, and believe it or not, it was right on estimate. So how about that? That's the first time that's happened in a while. Our city engineer, Todd McCluskey, is here tonight, and he has, you like this, a one-slide presentation. So how about that? He's got a lot on one slide. So Todd, thanks for coming tonight.
I like to
and just
keep things short and sweet.
talking briefly about the project that I think most of you are aware of and the reasons for the project.
Yeah,
Thanks, Todd.
I think most of you are pretty familiar with this project. It's been talked about for a long time. I'm just going to go over the 3 major bullet points that the city will accomplish by implementing this project. And if you have any questions, let me know. So as we know, this is a water and sewer extension project. Water will be extended from the intersection of Paulson Road and Prairie Drive along Paulson Road all the way to Radio Road, where it will continue north and be extended underneath existing casings under State Highway 35, where it will connect to the existing water distribution system that was stubbed out for this purpose in the Sterling Ponds Corporate Park. The sewer portion of this project will include sanitary sewer from the same starting point at the intersection of Paulson Road and Prairie Drive, extending about a third of the project distance north to accommodate future development if it occurs at that property that is not yet annexed into the city. And it would also include sanitary sewer in the western third of Paulson Road in the newly annexed Thompson property, where it will then continue north. Sewer will then continue north underneath State Highway 35 and connect into existing stubs from the Sterling Ponds Corporate Park project. The benefits of this project are that we're going to have a loop system inside the Sterling Ponds corporate and residential areas that's going to be basically good municipal water system design, where we will have a loop system, provide redundancy for water main breaks, that we can still provide water if there is a break on the main connecting the Sterling areas into the city, and it will provide increased fire flows for the commercial and residential areas. This project will also, of course, include connecting the North Water Tower into the Sterling Ponds Corporate Park, which was necessary in order to achieve those fire flows and redundancy. And additionally, the third one, and this was honestly kind of a surprise that we didn't expect, but because the Thompson property on the western side of Paulson Road was annexed, there are proposed developers planning to submit GDP submittals for construction projects there, and as part of the annexation agreement, they are sharing a portion of the capital cost for this project. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's around $450,000. Does anybody have any questions?
Does this help the future Man Valley project that will be coming up?
That's funny. I skipped right over bullet point number 2. the Man Valley Corporate Park will be served by the water main that we will extend hopefully along Paulson Road. We will connect to Radio Road, loop through Man Valley, and then connect to the main pressure zone on West Division Street.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
I could build on that too. So Todd and I and engineers are working on a plan then to extend water down Radio Road through the university farm, potentially, to even serve water to the university farm, and then out to Man Valley. So be looking for that probably early next year, huh, Todd?
We're pushing hard.
Todd or Kevin, what's the time frame for the water tower and this? Kind of put those on a calendar for us?
Both of these projects will have substantial completion dates at the end of October 2023. We haven't seen any construction activity for the water tower yet, but are expecting it sometime in October, and we expect to see a bunch of winter construction, both for the pouring of the foundation of the water tower and the installation of the water transmission main up the gravel road to the field up top of the hill.
Thanks.
So Mark, there are some performance metrics in the contract with the company building the water tower to have substantial completion by, was October of next year?
I think it's late October 31st.
So there are some pretty substantial penalties if they don't get that, though we haven't seen any progress to date. We're assured it's going to happen, so.
Any incentives? Is there a need to have it done before October 23rd or 2023?
Yes. We want to be in on Paulson Road before a potential developer needs to be served by water and sewer along the Thompson annexation area.
So there are incentives or just disincentives?
We have a stick, not a carrot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. I like that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then I am looking for a motion to approve the resolution recommending award of the North Loop Extension construction to Total Excavating. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is approved. All right, so next up, I believe, is a report on the hydroelectric relicensing, dam removal, Army Corps of Engineers, Kinni Corridor Plan update.
And I'm sad to say it's longer than one slide. It's going to be a little longer. So Amy Peterson and myself are going to do a presentation. I was going to say short presentation. It's probably going to be 15, 20 minutes, giving you an update of dating back to 2016 when the Kinni Corridor Committee kind of came up with their concepts for the Kinni Corridor that were adopted. And Amy's going to go over that. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've already heard tonight in our public comment and probably address a lot of those things and talk about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going with the relicensing project and how these all may tie together. So I'm going to come on up with Amy and we're going to go over this.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just sit right here until you're done, because there's not room for two of us up there. How about that?
Okay, we will tag team this though, so
Yeah.
feel free to jump in whenever you need. And if you guys have questions as I go along, please feel free to stop me and jump in as well.
Yeah, I'm going to set you up a little bit more, and I had already mentioned it, but a lot of this is out there, but I was talking to Amy and to Mr. Simpson and Mr. Stroud. I said, I don't think people are aware of it, or they forgot about it, or you weren't on this board and didn't know what happened. But in 2015, 2016, there was a collaborative group that got together with a bunch of charrettes, and we had consultants talking about what the river can be. And that took place, and there were some fairly substantial things that came out of that. So Amy's going to remind everybody, including myself, of what happened and what transpired back in 2016 and what the grand vision is for the river. So we're going to set that up there, and then I'm going to go back, and then we'll talk about the relicensing and dam removal.
Okay, so I think we've already established we're going to talk about the Kinni Corridor Plan. And then we'll do the hydro recap and then talk about the Army Corps of Engineers. So the Kinni Corridor Plan began in 2016, the planning for it, and the plan was actually adopted in January of 2019. So from the plan, I pulled this vision that was established at the beginning of the process, and I just highlighted some of the key words. So the river corridor will serve as an asset. It'll provide economic vitality and ecological stability. It'll connect people. It'll strengthen our sense of place and will preserve and promote history and culture. The guiding principles from the plan are listed here, and they really are compatible with the vision and those words that we just talked about. Things like public health and wellness and inclusivity and sense of place. You can read them. The next thing that I pulled were the key categories. So the master plan includes these key categories, and then recommendations fall under each of the categories. So from there, the planning and the steering committee through the process researched river cities and towns across the country and provided examples and analysis to help promote the vision and support what we just talked about in these few slides. So I've pulled some of those pictures from communities across the country that the steering committee kind of chose, and they resonated with them about things that we wanted coming out of this plan. So things like access in the community, whether that's bridges, crossings, paths, trails, etc. And here's another one that's trails, connectivity, access to the river, a vibrant downtown. We talked about opportunities for nature, recreation, access, again, in different capacities. And this last one here focuses on all of those that we talked about, but also includes the education component that was talked about during the planning process as well, whether that be through interpretive signage or if you envision that as a nature center in the background, that could be too. So there's a number of concept maps that are in the corridor plan. This is just one of them that I pulled. This is from the middle Kinni, essentially, if you're looking, Maple Street down to Winter Street. And it includes opportunities for green infrastructure, parks, trees, stormwater, recreational spaces, an additional bridge, the Trestle Bridge, which would potentially be right here. It includes redevelopment areas in the downtown. And some of those natural and play spaces, like a natural playground and the potential for an amphitheater, as well as a gathering space for the community. So this is a list of projects that were included in the plan that were already started during the planning process. So I would say most of these are larger projects that are still underway, right? So Glen Park Master Plan, we've implemented the west side of Glen Park. We still have the east side to do. You're well aware of the North Interceptor sewer project, which is still happening. I think the one on here that was paused was the downtown alley upgrades. That was started pre-COVID, got paused during COVID, and we decided to wait on it until we do the downtown plan that will be coming up. So that one's been paused. In addition to these, I just printed off 2 pages out of the plan to leave at your desk. Those include jumpstart projects and priority projects that were included in the plan. I'll let you take a look at those on your own just to get yourself familiar with those as well. Some of those are underway, some are not. Kind of the same situation we have here. So I will pause here and ask if there's any questions on the planning process so far.
How was the plan how did it materialize?
Like physically, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, who are the stakeholders?
How did it get started? Or?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So
just in short.
Started in 2016. They formed a steering committee which had maybe 8-10 people, and I might even look back to Patricia because she was on the steering committee at that time.
Yeah, there was 11 of us.
There was 11, yeah, that formed. That was brought together by the city to kind of guide the planning process. It was just about a 2-year planning process with lots of public meetings. We met in the basement of the library. We met at St. B's once or twice. Large turnouts, probably the best turnouts in the community that we've seen for a planning project in years. So, yeah, does that help?
Yep, that was just for the benefit of some that haven't been on or haven't been involved in it.
Sure, yeah.
The large turnouts, were they pretty well balanced from like people from all different sides, or were they really just people that were interested in having the dams come out, or was it a diverse?
I would say
group?
yes. I mean, from my perspective, I saw folks from both sides, and I saw people that were passionate about the river attending those meetings. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going, but if you think of anything else, don't hesitate to jump in. So, after Council passed Resolution 6234 in 2018, which recommends relicensing of the Junction Falls Dam for a final time and provides target timelines for both dams to be removed, we began the process of implementation of the plan itself. Excuse me. So a public-private partnership was recommended as part of the implementation, and the Kinni Corridor Collaborative was started with the MOU between the city and the KCC being signed in August of 2019. The goals of the MOU in general terms include fundraising, acknowledging the KCC as the city's primary funding partner, providing a framework for project-specific work to remove the dams, and to engage a network of partners. So those are broadly the goals. I would say that recently city leaders met with the KCC's leadership to talk about KCC progress and potential future adjustments to where their work is headed. And as of today, we're still in those talks and waiting a response from the KCC. Yeah.
What are the target dates for the dam removals?
So Powell Falls, I believe, is 2026, and Junction is 2035 to 2040.
Yep, thanks.
Yep.
Amy, maybe it's premature, but what would need to be adjusted on the agreement or in the MOU between the city and KCC? I'm not clear on what's up for debate or what's trying to be determined in what KCC would provide as the primary partner.
So the discussion centered around, I believe, city leadership has been having some challenges with the performance of the KCC, so that's what was being discussed.
To date, how much has the KCC raised towards this project overall?
Okay, so I'm going to look to Kevin. I believe what the city has received is just over
31,000.
31,000.
Yeah, they're basically committed to half of the decommissioning plan, I think, which is roughly 65,000 and some change, and they've paid almost half of that. I think they paid half of that. So to answer your question, we've heard of other verbal commitments, Kellen, but today they've committed to the half of the decommissioning plan, which is between 60 and 70,000, and they paid about half of that.
And where were we, what were we expecting by today?
I think, too, Mark, you've been here a few years now, and I think what we've heard, that's the argument I think, some of our council leadership is making. I'm not sure what that exact number is, but I think it's, just to be vague, more than we've gotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I remember.
Is that a play?
I remember Scott Simpson saying in March of 21 that he wanted to see, or would like to see, at least 2 million in 36 months. So we're halfway. So maybe the end of the race is going to be a sprint.
Yeah, Amy and I kind of went over this presentation today, and I think I was using some of those numbers in this discussion with her that, I don't think that's written down anywhere, but your recollection of that number is, well, maybe someone would argue, no, I never said that or whatever, but I, think that's it. And I've heard people say we have probably a $10 million project. We're hoping they can raise, 2-3 million. I mean, I think that was kind of the unstated expectation maybe, but my gut feel says that, though I don't think anybody can point to it and say, we never said that. I mean, somebody could say that. But I think, wasn't that kind of the flavor? Mark, is that what I'm hearing you say you heard?
Yeah, and I reviewed that utility board meeting for March 17th of 2021, I think it was. March 15th.
Well, that would be more accurate probably than what I'm saying. If I'm paraphrasing that correctly, I don't want to misspeak and throw anybody under the bus, but I'm thinking that was the flavor of it. Speak to that.
And if I remember right, it was 1.9 million is what we were looking for to do a basic removal and reconstruction of the Powell Dam area. That didn't include any of this stuff that you just showcased about nature centers and pedestrian bridges and walkways and park benches, etc. That is not supposed to be coming from the city's funds or the utilities funds. And have we seen any of that? That's in the plan of those stakeholders of beautifying Lake Louise?
Yes.
And how much money have we seen for that?
So, if I can, if I understand the agreement correctly and how this was to function, right, there were supposed to be letters of agreement that were set up between the KCC and the city. To date, one of those have been established. And I believe that one sets up the 70,000 that was agreed upon. So if I don't want you to think that they should just be sending us checks, because I don't think we've gotten far enough in the process for them to do that. Again, Kevin mentioned, in our discussions with them that they have verbally stated they have more funding raised. But I can't say more than that, I guess.
So maybe, to finish that and answer Adam's question, I think the expectation maybe at some of the city council level compared to what's happened, there's some misalignment there. And that's why that's why the conversations are going on right now with the KCC regarding that. Is that fair, Nick? I mean, as a council member?
I'd like to let Amy speak because she was going to speak, but I'll say yes. Yes to that being fair.
And overall, I would say that, I lost my train of thought. I was going to go off of what you were saying. So the funding model that was originally put forth from the plan is still what we're going forward with. We are not anticipating ratepayers paying for this project. That was, I believe, specifically stated in the resolution when it was approved. So I understand that things may not be going as smoothly as you anticipate, but it doesn't mean that we are wholly off course and this can't be readjusted. So
one point of clarification. It's clear, and Scott Simpson has made it clear more than once to us, that the utility people will not be paying for this. But I pay federal taxes, I pay state taxes, and all I've been hearing for the last months are, we're going after the DNR, and we're going after them hard. Okay, where does the DNR get their money? Where does the Corps of Engineers get their money? So the fine print says we're not charging the utility people, but the reality is that, yes, you are. And that was never the flavor. How many, Nick obviously wasn't on the city council at the time. How many of those city council members that started this ramrod, like Michael Page and Hal Watson and Allison Page, are still on the city council?
I want to speak to that real quick, and I feel like I'll just take some arrows from you, Mark, if you want. But I don't think it's ever fair. It's a larger fiscal conversation, and we can certainly have it. But if money's earmarked at a federal level or a state level, clearly people pay for it, but they're paying for it in a different mechanism, different fashion than if, like my bill this month, showed up after the adjustments. And my wife said, what is up with the cost of, right? Because we have the 12-month average. And I said, well, this is what it is, right? And we understand that, and you all are ratepayers, so we get it. So to your initial point on that, I don't think it would be fair to put this upon the city of River Falls and say you're changing course entirely and you're putting us in the backs of taxpayers, because broadly, yes, we're all taxpayers and it is being paid, but that money is going to be spent with or without us. If we're on the train or we're off the train's still going down the track. The question becomes, as a policymaker for a council and a relationship to the city, do we want to be on that track? And it is very hard. I come from a school of Republican belief, if you will, that if there was federal money, you take it. The only time you won't take it is if you think that federal money is a one-time hit that's going to have substantial worse, costs down the road. So just broadly speaking, I think, and Amy's going to get into it, but there's an opportunity here to look at this that gets us to larger, further goals. And I think we at least have to listen and look at it. But I don't think we should characterize it as if this becomes a $10 million bond that's going to, the way the school district, when they want to build facilities, right, they have to come out and say, hey, we're going to do 18 million and we're going to change the rate on that. So I just think we should keep it in context, because it's not changing substantially what ratepayers will do in the city of River Falls. And I think that's all fair to say.
The only thing I would add to that, Nick, in the conversation and the discussion is, for 18 months, I've been waiting to see a plan for the removal of the Powell Dam. And I was waiting probably a year or more before that, 18 months ago, for a plan for the removal of the Powell Dam. And I still haven't seen it. So my biggest debate here is, we haven't seen a plan. We don't know, other than what Amy showed us right now, we don't know where the causeway's going in. We don't know how they're going to remove. They're just going to blow it. Are they going to open a 13-foot center section and let the water flow free? Then you have this absolutely no control after that. So how deep is the pocket? How much do we go after the feds and the DNR for money? Patricia offered a wonderful opportunity to spend the money, and let's get what we were told we were going to get, instead of just throwing this pie in the sky thing and saying, well, the money will be there when we need it. And so far, that has been not true. So that's what I'm looking for, is a plan. And I haven't seen it.
I just, a couple points of clarification. So the plan, we have a 60% decommissioning plan done that was submitted to FERC when we transferred the lower dam to the DNR. So we do have a 60% complete decommissioning plan that does show where the causeway will go, where the trucks will haul the sediment. We do have a price tag. We have an estimate of a little over $1.4 million. So we do have a 60% completed plan and an estimate of a little over $1.4 million to remove Powell Falls with restoration light.
I remember it at no more than 1.9, and that causeway was built so that we could get over the dam,
right,
to remove the sediment that's in the river right now that we haven't done anything about.
So we did work with AIRS on that, and we did modify the plan, and we got it down to 1.4 from the 1.9, and decided that building that causeway over the dam was not necessary.
So it's, okay, so I haven't heard any of this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's in the, well, that decommissioning plan is in, I don't know if I brought it just that alone, but it's been in the whole package that we submitted to FERC.
So the dam will be like it was never there.
The dam is going to be removed from where it is. The sediment, the dam spoils be going into the quarry, just the old quarry, just behind the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
That is in the decommissioning plan.
And the part of the decommissioning plan includes river bank restoration then?
It's called Restoration Light, and then we had worked with the DNR and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on that plan as well.
Okay. Okay. So I
And
just,
there, and that, so we were, I'm telling you, we were probably a month away from pulling the trigger on that until we had, so I'm gonna get into that in my piece, so I don't want to, spoiler alert of the end of the movie here, but, you know, then late last November, early December, as we're about ready to pull the trigger on this, you know, earlier this year, is Army Corps says, hey, maybe would you be interested in this? So that's this teaser for later. Go ahead, back to you. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
All right, so the last thing on this slide that I included was simply just some information about Bay City, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've read the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, but they have a project that is somewhat similar to ours. They are receiving some money from the Corps. They are utilizing the Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance. And you can check out their page listed here as well, as far as a public-private partnership that seems to be functioning well. So let me see. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'm sitting over there thinking, you know, all these are just ideas, right? And this community has ideas. There's conflicting ideas about the importance of hydro and renewable energy. There's visions for the alleyways and the river. It's just all ideas until the money comes, right? I mean, really, when you boil it down, there's a lot of people have ideas. I have ideas at home too that I'm not going to do because I don't have the money. So it really boils down in the end too. And I mean, that's maybe where the tension is. Where's the money coming from? So we shall see. So I'm going to talk about a little bit where we're at, where we've been, what's been spent, and where we think we're maybe going with the dam, the rivers. And again, I'm going to talk about this and then mesh that with the ideas, and then get a pulse of the room. So Amy did kind of touch on this, but we declared our intent to relicense our project, which was Powell Falls and Junction Falls, one license, two dams, back in 2018. We announced our intent. City Council followed that with a resolution in February of 2018. Well, I guess they started with February 2018 and we just declared our intent in August and said, hey, we want to, so I'm going to summarize this because this is a pretty important summarization. We want to remove Powell Falls by 2026. We want to run Junction Falls until somewhere between 2035 and 2040. It also says in there, our long-term vision is a free-flowing river. So I don't, you know, maybe a better way to say that the arguing about dams or no dams is kind of laid out in that council resolution from February 2018 that says the dams are coming out, the river will be free-flowing. It's really a matter of when they're coming out. I think there's a more defined version of the lower one. So, and the upper one is 2035 to 2040 was what was in there. And I've also heard council say, this isn't written anywhere either, but I think if show me the money, right? If the money shows up, we can have a discussion. So we're in this route, we're relicensing, things are going swimmingly for a couple of years, and we get this giant flood in 2020. And we recognize that we had some stuff that jammed into the wing walls, and it was a huge stress on that dam. And FERC said, hey, we probably should do an inspection on that dam. And in order to do an inspection on the dam, you had to draw down the lake. So we drew down the lake so we could get a good look at the dam. We sent our professional inspectors in. They said, yes, the wing wall was damaged. There were some other cracks, but all in all, the dam is still in good shape. It wasn't compromised. And we did learn that. So we felt good about the fact we still had a good dam. But with the water down, I think we started asking ourselves in October or November, I believe it was, of 2020. We drew this down in October of 2020. So I think November, December, we started saying, do we want to refill that thing? I mean, it's down. We lost a bunch of sediment. If we refill it, we may have to go through this exercise again, and more sediment will go downstream. Maybe there's a way to just leave it drawn down. FERC says, because I'm involved, I hear this one, they say, never heard of that before. So we said, well, let's see it. Let's flush this out. So we did a study session with the City Council and the Utility Advisory Board. And we threw 5 options on the table. Option from repairing the dam, investing in that, refilling the lake, and begin generating electricity again. That was option 1. To option 5 was basically remove it as fast as we can. Typical of our policymakers, we picked the option in the middle that said, hey, why don't we keep it drawn down, but let's fix it so it opens up more and we can get some water flowing through there. And then let's also see, at this point now, if we can transfer the ownership of that dam or the oversight of that dam from FERC to the DNR. I remember having like 17 people on a call, and they were like, we never did this, never heard of that. We gave the reasons why we thought this was a good idea. And like in 10 days, we got them to sign off on it. So I don't know how we did that, but we did. And they said, if you clean off this trash rack, if you sandbag the wing wall, if you remove the turbine, I think those are the 3 big items. We will allow you, FERC, to move that over to the DNR. And we had to have a decommissioning plan in there as well as part of that. I think there was like 5 things. I think I hit 4 of the 5, but it was clean the trash rack, take the generator out, fix the wing wall, have a decommissioning plan, and there might have been one more. Fix the gate. Fix the gate. And we operated the gate, so we didn't have to fix the gate. So that's how we got signed off on that. We think we did a video of it or something, I believe. So we accomplished all of those things. Our crews worked like crazy to get that wing wall sandbagged and fixed. And we got the jurisdiction of that dam turned over to the DNR. That was also crucial because right before we were applying for the $1 million DNR dam grant. That's why we really had to push that. I think it was in the month of March of last year. And we did an unbelievable amount of work like in 3 weeks and got that done. And nobody could believe it, but we did it. We got the jurisdiction turned over. We applied for a DNR grant, and we did end up getting the $1 million DNR dam grant. So I'm going to hold that thought because I have that in like 3 slides, I think. Mark, here's part of that decommissioning plan that shows the causeway across there, disposal site. That's in that. I
remember that, but I don't remember ever seeing anything about. In fact, Tim and I discussed what would be left where the dam is currently.
Yeah. And that's probably, and to your defense there, I think some of that detail might not have been in there because we're at the 60% version here. So I think a lot of that demolition detail and stuff probably wasn't in there yet.
I remember those things.
Yeah. So 60% completed decommissioning plan with some of those details you mentioned. So here we are, shifting from relicensing to decommissioning, or at least on parallel tracks. I have to always have the caveat here because it happened last time. Somebody saw this picture and went, when was that in the river? And this is a stock picture. This is not our river. This is not our equipment. We're not taking that dam out, but it was in there for effect. So there we are. So I was jumping ahead of myself. So we did all that to allow ourselves to apply for the $1 million dam grant from the Wisconsin DNR for removal of the lower dam, Powell Falls, which we were awarded a few months later. So that money is still in the queue. And that $1 million dam grant to remove is in the queue from the DNR. We had some further talks about it and said, how long can we leave that in the queue? And they were pretty, verbally they said, until you need it. I don't know if that means forever. If we delay, we should definitely tighten that up. And they also said in a phone call, they said, furthermore, if you're going to take the upper one out, you can maybe reapply for another $1 million for the upper. But that was just in a phone conversation. That's not written anywhere. But there's a spirit of that as well. So we got the money for the grant. I mean, we are now thinking late last year, we're moving ahead and we're going to finish the plan, Mark. We're going to get a 100% decommissioning plan. I had an estimate from heirs to go out to bid. We were going to bid this like in October, November, December. And it was late November when I did get the call from the Army Corps that said, hey, Kevin, in the last, I don't even know what was the very first big COVID $1 trillion, $2-3 trillion bill, what that one was called in 2020. But in that passage of that bill was money for the U.S. Army Corps to do projects like this. They said, hey, we got $10 million. We're familiar with your project. We helped you work on studies back in 2020. They said, we like that project. Would you be interested in allowing us to do a federal interest determination to see if we even have a project? I wrote them a letter in January of, what was it, was it this year? Yeah, it was 22. So it was January of this past year, and said, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do a federal interest determination to see if there even might be a project. They came back to us in April, and they said, hey, I think we might have a project. But to move forward, you have to have your policymakers decide if you want to invest in doing an 18 to 24-month study to move forward with the Army Corps that's going to cost us $300,000 to $350,000. So that's where we are today. So we put this $1 million dam grant on hold because we've been teased now with a $10 million to not only remove Powell Falls, but potentially Junction Falls, do a more major restoration, and use it to start doing some of the things that Amy described in the beginning of the presentation today. Some of those ideas that Amy presented are ideas. And I know there have been council members that want to be doing this, and we keep pushing them out because the money's not available. This may be enough seed money to get us going on some of these projects. I think that's the philosophical thought behind moving forward with the Army Corps of Engineers with the $10 million. Again, I don't know if it's a right answer or wrong answer, but this is what we're considering here now. So you go, well, how much did we spend? So I did put this together. You all know we spent, if you include the Army Corps' work of $210,000 that they did for us with the studies, we're over $1 million. I mean, we've spent, the utility, the ratepayer has spent almost $1 million on our work to relicense this project with FERC. That's not new news to you. These are numbers I've shown you before. You know, the $1 million number, you've heard that number. That's what we spent today in 4 years with this project. Then below, Mark, there's the 1.428 million, that decommissioning on hold. That's that new number we came up with. So the grand total, 2.3 million, minus the $1 million grant, it'd be, the ratepayer would be in it for 1.3 million, 1.35. That's with just removing Powell Falls, nothing to do with anything else that Amy has presented from the key.
Kevin?
Yeah.
What else could possibly be studied in another 2 years after there were just a ridiculous amounts of studies that were requested?
Correct.
I mean, how many were there total?
11. Yeah. So there's, 11 or 13. I think there was 2 added on there. Right. So yeah.
So I guess what else needs to be studied?
So here's some good news on that.
What could have changed from then to like now or even a few years from now?
So let me answer Kellen's first and Mark, and then I'll go to you. So in talking to the Army Corps, so they are when they talk about their studies, they're mentioning we need to do core samples. We need to do historic site. I said, you know what, that's done. That's done. They said it is. So this is a couple of weeks ago. We were in a phone call with them, and we were forwarding them the studies and getting them to our website, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's done, so we won't have to do that. So the amount of money that we'd have to do in these studies is reduced by probably a couple $100,000 because they can use a lot of the work that's already been done is recent enough. So, and I don't know which ones exactly, but I know the sediment study and the work Interfluve did, they were very interested in that. Some of the stuff SHPO did for the historic stuff, they're interested in that. Things that they thought would be kind of expensive and hard to do, we have done, to your point. So there is that they won't have to do.
Okay, thanks. Because I just remember like looking at the laundry list of studies, like, and there had to be some data that they could have used in there to offset the cost. Yep.
One more comment I'm going to go to Mark on that is, so I think the Army Corps, they're excited about this project, maybe because of its proximity, maybe because they have some of their staff that live in the area. They can come to it, they can see it. I mean, they want a success story they can show and tell to their people. But when we told them about all the studies we've done, their excitement level went up like tenfold. They're like, I can't believe that's done, and that's done, and well, that'll be easier because we have this. So, and they're credible studies that are done, some of them by the Army Corps themselves, different branch, but done. So, Mark.
Good. So if we could just freeze you for there on Powell, the removal of Powell.
Yes, right there at the bottom of this page.
Yep. So I've said this many times in the past, and I just said it 10 minutes ago. What's the plan for the decommissioning and when we get our next 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 inch rainfall event? So the dam is removed. We still have approximately 180,000 cubic yards of sediment that is not stabilized. And it's going down that river. And I've talked to so many fishermen that say that that dune is still in the river. It's still migrating, and that was only about 20,000 yards.
Yeah.
And we're
yeah,
talking
50.
10 times that amount.
Correct. So, a couple points on that. So one, there is a plan. So the plan is if that lake does fill up and bounce, we do have a plan to lower the gate, let the water move slowly. I mean, there is a plan for that with the DNR to enact that plan. Two, we do feel because that lake has vegetated, I wouldn't call it daisies, but it's vegetated. The soil is more stable today than it was 20 months ago. So yes, the banks will slough. It would go if you got a 10-inch rain event, most likely, but not as extreme as it would have. So then you said, well, so what is the plan? So we were going to enact the plan. The plan was to remove Powell Falls by probably next spring. But this offering has made us pause on that. On hold, I guess I have here. So we're contemplating, we had a plan, but we have maybe an alternate plan, and we're just flushing that out, and that's why we're here tonight. So that's why we're here. So
Get it that it's stabilized, but it's low growth, not real deep rooted
right,
grass. And that is not going to hold anything.
right.
When it decides it's going to go, it's going to go. And then where's the DNR? What are they going to say? So we breach the dam, and we end up with a Willow River Dam situation where Lake Malibu is full. People can't even float their pontoon boats. And then what? So then we go back to the DNR and we ask the DNR for Lake Malibu. I think it was $11 million to dredge Lake Malibu so that people could float their boats again.
Right.
Was that ever done? Or is it just a cesspool now? So those are the things that I just wish we got this pie in the sky idea that we're going to remove these dams and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And there's just not enough deep thinking going on of what the real situation could be.
So the things you're bringing up they're brought up 7 years ago. So this isn't new. Right? I mean, I remember in those charrettes they were asking the same questions, right? The fishermen versus, the people that want the dams out and the sediment. And so these aren't new conversations, and they've been vetted, and this sediment's been tested. And here's a fact, and I don't have the exact number, but when that flood came through, about 20 times the sediment went down that river from that flood than left when we drew down the lake. I mean, it was just significantly more. So I'm not downplaying that event. I'm not downplaying a potential event.
But that was 16,500 cubic yards that went through in the flood. We're talking 200,000.
Yeah. And would it all, I don't know if it would all go or not. I mean, that would be, you're right. No one's saying, the DNR is not saying, we're not going to solve this debate here, but I hear what you're saying. And the DNR is involved in those conversations. So let's move ahead a slide. Where are we at? So, we're scheduled to have the upper relicensed next August. So we're on the home stretch of that. So summer of 23, end of August next year, Junction Falls will be relicensed. And that's why the words I've used, this new concept, this new idea, it kind of is like turning the Titanic, right? We're all headed in a direction, and now we've got a potential opportunity. So here we are. I already hit these, so Amy, why don't you going to come back up, talk a little bit about the Army Corps? I think I kind of hit some of these, so maybe we can go a little faster on this. So, this one here.
Talk about spoiler alert, Kevin.
Spoiler, I think I just went right over it. So,
yes. So let's Yes, so he did go over history. Unless you have any further questions on that, I'll keep rolling. So this next one just kind of talks a little bit about the background that the Army Corps of Engineers is bringing to us. So it's the Continuing Authorities Program, or the CAP program. So as with any federal programs, they have so many acronyms that we're now getting used to. So I'll kind of try to introduce you to some of those as we go on. It's part of the Section 206 of the Water Resources Act of 1996 as amended. So, but the scope really restores degraded ecosystems to a more natural condition. That's what we're headed towards if we were to go this route. So. The CAP program requires the feasibility study, right? Kevin talked about them using the background data that we already have to feed into this study. We had conversations with them today. I think part of what they have to do is to go back through those studies and not necessarily check, but check to make sure that the information they need to go forward is there, right? So the feasibility study, the first $100,000 is paid with federal dollars. After that, the remainder is a 50-50 federal-local split. So currently, they're estimating the high end of $750,000 for the feasibility study, which the city's portion would then be, so take off the first 100, right, you're down to 6. So city's portion being $325,000. So last month, the city did send a letter to the KCC requesting 50% of the city's portion to be funded by the KCC. And again, we're awaiting a response from the KCC. So if we are to go forward with the feasibility study and then move into a project, the design and the construction would be funded at a 65-35 federal local cost share match with the fund capping at $10 million. That's kind of the basics of the program. In past conversations with the Army Corps, they have laid out a number of alternatives that they would look at in the feasibility study should we go forward. The first alternative is no action. Second, remove Powell and simply restore. The third alternative, remove Powell and Junction and restore. And in those conversations, the city has provided them what we would like to see as maybe alternative D, which really is removing Powell and Junction Falls dams with restoration, but also including the stormwater management to take care of the outfalls that currently head directly into the lakes, right? So that stormwater piece is taken care of. If this really is the mission to make it better than it is today, that stormwater piece really needs to be taken care of as well. So the Corps has looked into that alternative D, if you will, and they're amenable to that. We still have some details to work through on it, though. So alternative D has broad estimates upwards of $15 million for the project in its entirety. And of course, they have a cap at 10 million. So we're also kind of exploring what that looks like, what alternative funds could be brought together to make the project go. So, Kevin, I think I already covered the conversations with the DNR, so that million plus maybe a potential another million for Junction could potentially be there. And so as staff has considered the possibility of an Army Corps project and opportunity, we've weighed the pros and cons. At this point, we're, I think, looking to come forward with a recommendation that we go forward with a Corps opportunity. And at least it's worth exploring through the feasibility study. And thus, we're providing this update to you this evening. We're going to council next week with the same update, essentially. And then the plan would be to come back to the Utility Advisory Board in October with a request put forth for recommendation to go forward with the feasibility study. And then again, take that to council at the end of the month. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, I just this is why we're giving this to you tonight. So you have a month to think about all your questions. Mark is going to have a long list. This is good. I like it. And but no, so we're going to come back to you next month, and the Army Corps will be here that night to answer questions. unless you want to have them present something. They asked us today if they should be presenting something next month or if they just here for questions and answers. I said it's going to be up to you folks to decide that, but they'll be here to talk about their 206 project, CAP project, so section 206.
Doing the feasibility study, I mean, if we approve that, does that obligate us then to go ahead and take the 10 million, or like we just get to the end and we're like, no, appreciate the data and it is what it is?
Yes, correct. So the feasibility study we signed on to for the 18 to 24 months, we go through that process. If at the end of that process, at least is my understanding, we, for whatever reason, decide that, yeah, this isn't a good, place for us, we can end our relationship at that point before we move into design and construction.
I mean, one could look at it, it kind of buys you a couple of years to consider. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but here's maybe in that too is working with the Army Corps, nothing's going to happen quickly. We talk about Junction Falls coming out somewhere between 2035 and 2040. I think this opportunity probably escalates that by 5 to 7 years, maybe. This isn't something that the Army Corps is going to have done by 2028. I'll just say that. I don't believe.
So, I guess with that, if there's other questions, I think as staff has moved forward, I think it's a huge vision, right? Which turns into a huge project with, to Mark's point, a whole lot of detail that takes time to figure out
money.
and wade through, and money, right? But as staff, we're trying to keep our eyes on the vision, the ultimate vision, which, if both dams were to come out and restoration and the recreation amenities put in place, would be forever changing for this city in the future. It just would be. So
I think it's just really the frustration that I usually feel is just and when I talk with other people, because they never hear about the dams. They just know that they're coming out and they saw the mock-up of the pictures and it's going to be like this wonderful falls. I'm like, actually, there's no falls. It's just going to be, and they said, well, there's these donations that are coming. I'm like, nope. There's maybe like 40,000 that's come in. And, we were really excited just personally as a family when we heard that there was a potential ice skating rink being discussed, and that got squashed over $100,000. But this project, 15 million, but that's the low ballpark. We don't really know. And that's really the frustration. I mean, that looks great. I mean, that would be wonderful. But the total, it's a lot of money. And there's we're going to be doing our own biosolids. We're going to build our own water tower. There's all the other projects that happen, all the things. Man Valley's being developed. We're taking an asset offline. We're taking an asset offline that actually generates money and electricity and goes into the portfolio of the renewable energy and everything. And so I know it's going to be a free-flowing Kinni, but it's just a really hard pill to swallow. And it just is. So I try to be as positive when I talk to people in the community about it, but we're not being totally truthful with everybody and saying yep, we just haven't had the fundraising that we talked about. Patagonia didn't come through, or Apple didn't give us a check, or whatever, pick a company. It's just not there. And it's just really surprising to people when I talk about it to them. So that's just sort of where I'm at. I'll support the study, just so you know.
Here's a question I'm thinking about when you're talking about that, because, I see the same things, hear the same things. So with this potential opportunity from the Army Corps, would you be disappointed if we just poo-pooed it and didn't even consider it? I may phrase it differently. Am I being responsible by at least considering it?
Yeah, absolutely. And a study's a study, we've done numerous ones already, and they are probably filed away in a hard drive somewhere and will never be looked at again until they're pulled up for something like this. I mean, that just happens. That will happen with these. I mean, just what the 10 million comes in, but then there's the leftover bill. The leftover bill and the ratepayers. This is a ungodly expensive town to live in. And I know that because I have lived in Chicago, Kentucky, Indiana, and now here. And I'm from Iowa. And we pay more here as a family than we did any of the other places, including Chicago. It's an expensive community. So when we're talking about we want to be welcoming to young families and things like you can't even get a house here. And then we're going to jack up the prices because we wanted to take these out and we have to pay for them. It's hard.
So there's this vision, right? We see the vision. We heard about the vision. And like I said earlier, the visions don't happen without money. And money, it's passed along to the people who live here, or the cost of housing, or taxes, or rates, or whatever. I think there are policymakers who want to see this type of thing through. You want to leave a legacy, right? You want to leave your community better when you left than when you got here. I think this vision probably would eventually happen if we stayed on our current path. 2035, 2040, we'd knock the dust off this again and go, this is the vision. Now the dams are coming out. Now let's do this. I believe this opportunity maybe would accelerate this vision 5 to 10 years. That's what I think really this is about. I think this vision would happen someday. Is the 10 million enough injection to move this project up 5 or 10 years? I think really that's what it boils down to. Nick, looks like you want to say something about it.
Actually, I'll let you go because you were trying. So I think it's complex, and I mean, I know we could actually speechify until midnight, and I promise I won't. It's complex because we started, and I'm trying to acknowledge all sides here. We started with a mechanism to develop an idea with 2015, 2016 timeframe. Certain people kind of dropped out of that process. You have different stakeholders, to Mark's point, right? So half the people that helped implement it are no longer around. So maybe there's even a frustration on that. I think it's fair to say that one side of the Falls debate, if you will, hard sold pretty hard on the vision and undersold a little bit on the reality of what the vision would be. But, and that's my position in terms of the understanding part of what's there. But when you draw back and you try to kind of get away from some of the, I'm going to say the emotion, and you try to have data-driven decisions, in terms of Kevin's point, we have to at least, I believe the city has an obligation to look at an injection to move us further ahead. I'm from town, I know some of you are too. Things look really similar to they did when I was a kid, right? I mean, so how do we actually make the middle of the Kinni an asset? I think that's a real question, and I think we have to have a determination to explore multiple options. I think one part that will be important in what comes to council and what comes back to us will be there is a gap. There's no doubt that there is a gap from a funding standpoint, because you're looking at 15 million. Let's, with inflation, say it's 20, and right now you're getting 10. So there's still 10 million there. Where does that come from? And I think that's a very fair question. My hope would be there's creativity in the pursuit of funds there, and then that can be tied into a lot of other avenues and streams and foundations and all sorts of things. This community does show a pretty good capacity to raise money when mobilized for a cause and a vision. So I think it'll be incumbent upon staff, and they know this and they're going to do it, but I'm saying it anyway, to paint the vision and make sure the vision that's painted is relatively realistic. And hopefully the Army Corps of Engineers as partners can help that part come to fruition as well. But the idea of getting to where stormwater and kind of this Riverwalk idea could actually be tied in, that's really huge, because we don't use our best asset in this town terribly well just because of how the town was built. It's no one's fault. None of us were responsible for it, but we have this resource, but it's kind of obscured and it's underutilized in that regard, other than the fishing and the kayaking part, which is important, but it's not determinative for the larger vision. So I just think we have to keep asking diligent questions. I think it's fair to always keep coming back with them, but but also know that when we're working with as many partners as we have, we're probably never going to have that 100% comfort level that you would like. That's how right? You're never going to get to that point where you just go, I understand everything, and I know this journey, and I know where the bumps are going to be in this journey. I don't think we'll get there. But as long as the Army Corps has a long-term vision to help on their end, because that was one question when I've talked to Kevin about this, was just, could their appetite change? Could a different administration come in and shift federal money into a different avenue? The same for the DNR. Could a new administration change how the DNR is looking at this? And those are always valid points because we do hear that politically things can change at the DNR sometimes. So I appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate the passion that this has elicited, and just hopefully we can keep seeing through the glass darkly towards a better day on where we're going.
Nick touched on a lot of the things that I was going to say in a much more eloquent way. Couple things that I'm going to remember very clearly from today. One was Ms. LaRue's comment about repurposing the lake and making that an ending point for the river and kayakers, and our biggest asset is the river. And I liked that idea, and that got me thinking, to what degree has the city included downtown business owners in the formation of these plans to get their take on it? Because I'm sure any one of them would love to have the downtown as a destination versus Glen Park seeing off and ending up in anywhere else.
And when we had the 2016 through 2018 planning session that came up with these, we had, what do they call it? Not TED Talks, what do we call them?
Tech Talks.
Tech Talks. I think we had probably half a dozen of them at the library. Community was involved. There's probably 100 people at each of these events. So that was a pretty widespread community outreach thing. Someone alluded to it earlier, it might have been Kellen, like who was there. I mean, sure, there's the interests that want to see something happen, probably outnumber those with competing interests. But yeah, there was business owners and things at those involved in developing some of these ideas. And there's competing ideas, right? That's really what it boils down to, competing ideas.
The one business owner that comes to my mind is Michelle Maher, who's the owner of the Falls Theater. She's been, I think, in my perspective, most involved in the planning process and the implementation as well.
So yeah, there was our outreach to the community. Whether or not people embraced that and came and participated, I don't. To what level? Some more than others, to Kellen's point.
So is the chamber involved formally at all?
I don't know that they're involved at the current time, no.
Were they involved the first time around, chamber? I don't remember.
Yes, actually, Chris was on the steering committee. Chris Blasius was the...
Right.
Yes.
She was part of that heavy steering committee that came up with the compromise resolution that made its way to council that got changed a little bit that night.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was some tough work that group put together, because I had just mentioned competing interests. You had 11 people who really couldn't agree on anything, but they did come together and they did come up with a resolution. So they're proud of that. I mean, they came up, they all compromised. Everybody was mad. That must have been a good compromise.
But now we're looking to change the resolution, right?
We're looking to potentially move it up. Yes. Yes. Yes, it's yes. The date of 2035 to 2040 would have to be amended.
Yeah.
At least explore that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it would probably be worth going back to some of the business owners again too, to sort of, bring forth the new ideas. I mean, there are empty stores down there, and I one of the things that comes to mind is I'm not going to try to put the business on the spot, but Smoky Treats is leaving town because they needed a different space and they couldn't find one that was affordable enough. So now they're going to leave for Hudson in December, which is disappointing. So I know that we want a very economic, vital downtown as well. But if it's also too expensive for the businesses to even operate in there, I think that would be a struggle then too. So I think bringing in the new folks would be, bringing the business owners back in, engaging the chamber and so on and so forth would be really beneficial.
Good. Well, thank you for your time this evening. We'll see you next month.
Amy, you can have a seat, but I have a couple of things that I still need
Yeah,
to
that's,
say.
yeah.
Oh,
I don't want to make you stand there all night.
sorry.
I feel like it's 2016 all over again. We'll be here till midnight.
Yeah.
I love it.
I promise it'll be 11:30. Yeah. Okay. So I want to make the statement again, I've said this in the past. I am not against removing Powell Falls Dam. Okay, let's make that clear. But what I want the city council to think about, because all we're going to do is just give an opinion, and the city council is going to have to bear down on this and make the decision ultimately. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I want to quote Scott Simpson. It's more than a gentleman's agreement. It is a MOU with the KCC that they're going to put their money where their mouth is. That's a quote. Wasn't the most elegant quote, but it's a good quote in my book. The lower dam will give these groups the opportunity to demonstrate that they can raise the money, and if they can't, then the UAB and council is going to have some decisions coming to authorize the removal of the upper dam. Okay? So ultimately, we want to, as the UAB, we're the watchdogs, we want to keep the rates low, but we want the best thing that we can give to the community. Okay? So the gentleman's agreement, let's go back to the gentleman's agreement, which I was raised on, a handshake, was we're not taking these things out, we're not taking Junction out until 2035. It was actually longer than that until Hal Watson introduced something and brought it back down to 2035. Okay. Another thing I'd like the City Council to think about is what has changed in our world since 2016 when we first started talking about this. The big one is our president, our current president, has come to all of us and said what to the big three? You will have electric vehicles by, and he's put a sunset date. So what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do? We hear about Las Vegas. They're running out of electricity. They can't do it. So what's changed since 2016? I also want to make a point that I may speak emotionally, but I'm talking about decision making. So the three most important things for me in this whole thing are what's the plan, and what's the plan? And I haven't seen them or heard them yet. So I was reading through our handout that we received, and Mike Noreen's report says 16.9% support renewable energy. That's big.
Number 3 in the country.
Number 3 in the country. And wait till they hear that we're taking out the hydros and we're going to burn more coal, because that's what WPPI's main source of electricity is, and gas.
Followed by nuclear.
What's that?
Followed by nuclear.
Followed by nuclear. So there's another thing for the City Council to think about. And I guess one other question is, I have brought it up in the past and I haven't heard anybody answer the question yet, is the business that I'm in, anything that is historic has to be run through the Historical Society. Now, has anybody talked to the Historical Society about the 120-year-old crib and timber dam that's under the water right now?
There was a historic assessment, and the only thing they found historic was this smoke, the chimney. Not even the building.
But I don't remember.
But I don't know if they included the.
I don't think that was brought up.
Yeah, okay. To be fair, I don't know if that was assessed, to be honest. So.
And my last thing is, where in the $15 million is the reconstruction of the bridges? Because I know how expensive bridges are.
Right, and that has been brought up. That was brought up back in the 2016, 2018 timeframe as well. And I still think that is a potential to be an issue, but it hasn't been defined as a certain issue. So that's a fair comment.
I've looked at the design of Winter Street. It can't stand without a reconstruction. So again, don't, Nick, I'm sorry, it may sound emotional, but this isn't emotional. This is decision.
That wasn't to
on
you,
mine.
so just, I don't want you to take offense. That was not directed towards you.
All right, I had taken that on as me, so. I just want to, I think we need to slow things down and be more responsible. We can't have this grandiose, I remember during the tech talks and stuff, they talked about Jackson Hole, and they said, oh, we want to be a Jackson Hole. And there were so many people that were looking at each other and we're saying, well, you don't want to be a Jackson Hole. It's the whole thing, build it and they'll come type of thing. And anyway, I think I've said enough. I really think that city council needs to, I think there were people that got on the city council for one agenda item. And then they got off. And they left us with this thing to try to sort out, to try to find the money. And it's just not working for me. So, and I want to say one last thing, Kevin. I can't say more how much I appreciate working with you. So this is absolutely nothing to do with you. This is a city council decision that was made, and it's been great.
You know what? We're all trying to make River Falls a better place than when we got here. How we do that is really, that's what we're going to have to try to figure out together. And two, on emotions, as policymakers and as respected adults, we want to keep our emotions in check. But sometimes emotions aren't bad, right? If someone's a little bit irritated, it's better to get it out now than go gossip behind someone's back. So there's that. That's just my style. So again, what we're trying to do is make River Falls a better place. How we do that and how we get there with the different ideas is a challenge. We think we may have an opportunity in front of us to maybe at least lubricate the gears on this thing to see it to another level of planning, assessing, without engaging a big project now, but it might buy us a couple of years to continue to have these conversations and figure out if this is something we really want to invest in or not as a community, and how. You may want to, but then you go how, and where do you get that money? So there's a lot of those questions to answer. Everything's a good idea but you have to find the money.
Maybe there's an E option. Maybe that is remove Powell, do a restoration of Lake Louise, get our walking trails in, upgrade the hydros in Junction so we can go to a super efficient, for $300,000, we can double electricity coming out of Junction. Slow things down until we figure out where this money is coming from. There's been so many times, I've only lived in this city for 20 plus years, there's been so many times that the city does something behind, and I've heard people complain that all of a sudden it happened. We didn't want that. How many signatures came out on certain things around this city, and it just gets passed behind everybody's back. And that doesn't sit real good with the community.
I'm sure it feels like, even the planning process for the Kinni corridor planning process, I'm sure it feels like that to some people, but there was a ton of money spent on marketing and these meetings and the evening meetings and the consultants. And I'm sure let's say 100 people went to those each night. Well, there's 16,000 people in town, so there's 15,000 people never heard of it. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, to your point, I don't know how you fix that. But that process, you may like it or not like it, but it was about as transparent as you could get. And even when it's over, people say, I never heard about that, or I wasn't involved in that. I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. I really don't. So that's where we're at today. I thought we'd introduce this. Chris Lick's online. Chris, do you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I'll keep my comments brief. My connection here is not the best. Obviously, this has been studied since before I was born. That we've been trying to decide what we should do. I tend to agree that things have changed in the world, how we generate power, how we're going to power our economy, all of those things, and certainly that needs to be, part of our consideration. I think it's really cool, that the DNR has categorized this as Class 1 trout stream from the headwaters to the St. Croix River. So that means through our 2 impoundment dams, it's considered Class 1 trout stream. I think certainly celebrating the fact that we could have dams control our stormwater all in the same piece, I think that that's something really we should be considering and celebrating that we do have a great resource and we can make it better without sacrificing renewable electric in our community, which I think is extremely important.
The dams, sediment traps, right? That was your point.
Yes, I mean they're already considered a Class 1 trout stream all the way through, and I understand the point of trying to channel the river, put some stormwater control in there, and keep the hydroelectric generation. And I still think that a lot of that down there could be cleaned up and made a lot nicer. That's been sort of the overarching theme of studies dating back to the 70s: is clean it up, make it attractive, and it never has been. And I think that was the point of Adam saying that he's lived in town, and it looks pretty much like it did when he was a kid.
And this is what we call heavy lifting, right? For policymakers. Nick and his group at the city council and you folks advising them, this is heavy lifting. These are huge decisions that have a lot of ramifications on a lot of people, people's pocketbooks, people's way of life, the mark you're going to leave on your community, hopefully doing it correctly. It's tough. These are hard. And so as staff, I'm just trying to listen, right, to what I think the policymakers are thinking, and we're presenting them maybe with an opportunity with a nice infusion of $10 million to maybe get us going, but maybe it's something you're not interested in, or maybe it's something we think we can work in. Tim, do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, when you talk about the emotional part about this, I think I'm the only member that was here that, when this was really coming to a head with the community, as far as really pushing so hard and so adamant and so emotionally to remove these dams. It was it was highly emotional and highly pressured. I mean, a significant amount of pressure put on. I think everybody felt that way. That that was the overwhelming. They had a lot of horsepower. Now, and they had these books filled with signatures. I said at the time to myself, basically, anybody else want to listen, that why didn't everybody commit to $100 or $500 or $1,000 when they signed that to help fund this thing? Then it would have been, we would have had something to get started with anyway. I mean, because so many people were so adamant about it. But then all of a sudden, now it's left in our hands to try to make sense of this. But the other thing that it just struck me was the whole process of relicensing these dams. And I get it that they're renewable energy and it has a value, but if you do the math, just the income and not including any expenses pays for about half of the amount of the year. It's going to take our revenue income to pay for 15 years before the licensing is paid off. And then if we were gonna keep them again, we were gonna look at relicensing them, after 25, 30 years. And And then by then, for sure, we're gonna have some major improvements because you always have to keep things up, fix things up, you know. It just became obvious to me that eventually we're going to have to come to grips with taking them out anyway, because they're too expensive to, if we can't control the licensing process, which we, you know, it was just study after study after study, and we couldn't say no to those apparently, and we had to pay for them, and then, you know, the next major renovation comes along. It just, unfortunately, just I couldn't see that in the long term that the dams that are really an asset. And I apologize, Patricia. I mean, it's just they were an asset for a long time, but they're getting to a point where with everything involved, they're kind of a liability. But anyway, that's my personal opinion.
Maybe we can get off of that. It kind of leads us to the next one, number 5.
Kevin, can we have a palette cleanser with the hydro production numbers, please?
Yeah, building off of Tim, so on page 11 in your packet, I was asked to present what the Junction Falls has produced in the last year and a half, and you can see on page 11, 1.355, 368 kilowatt hours of electricity. And if you take that times our wholesale rate, so this, and Mark was asking me in an email about what is an avoided cost. That means that we didn't have to go out and purchase that from WPPI, so we avoided that wholesale cost of electricity. I know Patricia, she had mentioned in her presentation the retail portion. You could calculate it that way too, but we think a fair assessment is that's 1.35 million kilowatt hours we didn't have to purchase with wholesale power, which equates into about 78,000 last year, and this year up to almost 48,000 through a little over the first half of this year. So, and that's just without using some Tim had mentioned maintenance, things like that. It's not taken out of that. So, so there's.
Yeah, I see in the couple pages in advance that we're budgeting about $100,000 for expenses for the hydros a year. I mean, is that?
Yeah, that's probably a little high, but yeah, but to your point, I mean, that's what Tim's point is.
That's labor, operating
labor, equipment, materials, fixing motors, and yeah, so to your point. Yeah, so that's the budgeted number. I mean, we got to have something in there in case something happens, right? I mean, when you're budgeting, you say, well, what could go wrong? What do you have to have? So do we spend that every year? No, but do we have it in the budget? Yeah.
But we could look at that for anything that we that we manage.
Right.
You have to have. I mean, it's just like if look at our home, 3 to 6 months of your income should be in a savings in case you have an emergency.
Right. I think just to make Tim's point clear, and we don't know the exact number, but we have gross avoided revenues, but we didn't take in the expenses into account for that. I mean, so there's going to be some.
If you upgrade the junction, it'll help pay.
Right.
It'll double pay for its removal someday, when we won't have the money to do it.
Yeah, I think the only point was there is expenses. So,
and then I see some of those numbers have went down. Is that because of the dry summer?
Yeah, and we did have this summer we had a couple months where we had to fix the governor on Junction Falls, so it was offline for a little while. Mm-hmm. That's why.
Yeah, I mean there's only a certain amount of water available to us every year, mm-hmm. And Mark, I understand that there could be there's always improvements on technology, and so you could get a turbine that was more efficient than what we have now. But to think that we could put a turbine in there could produce double the amount with the existing water we have. I I mean, I would need to see a lot more information on just how that could work.
That came directly from, who's our FERC representative? What's her name?
Leslie?
That came directly from Leslie to me. And in fact, in 2017, when she told me that, it was 250,000, and you could double it. So that wasn't my numbers; those were Leslie's.
Yeah, well, I'd need to see more than just somebody throwing out a possibility of, that, and because I don't know, a typical turbine like that probably is 35% efficient, and if you could increase it by 10% or 20%, I don't think you're going to get it to 70 or 80% efficient. But anyway,
Well, what she said was, just for clarification, is, and I can't remember what junction is, but it's like 60% efficient hydro. And she said it's just like buying a furnace for your house. She says you could get to 96, 97% real easy for $250,000. So just for the books, that's what she told me. So
I was asked to provide the hydro numbers, so I did. There they are.
Can I ask you to provide the finance report?
Yes, you can.
Thanks.
So I guess maybe some more good news. Nobody liked their utility bill. Before I get to the electric side, where we are plus $624,705 year to date, compared to $111,000 last year. So utility is doing well. We've had less than the expenses this year because we haven't spent as much on the relicensing this year. So I think that is part of that delta between last year and this year, how we're doing financially with the electric. But yeah, so everybody in their bill saw the huge power cost adjustment charge. WPPI Energy, we budget about $64 a megawatt is our budgeted number. And in the summer months, we were close to $100 a megawatt hour. So almost double of budgeted, almost. And they're going out to the marketplace to buy when they have to. Here's the good news, though. So we could have been about, if we weren't producing any electricity, we had to go out to the market and buy electricity. We would have been about 70% on the PCAC of your regular bill. But because WPPI also produces electricity, we're able to sell in that very high market. So we only saw like a 10 to 12% bump that we had to pass along. So being a seller helped us in the marketplace. So, but yeah, the energy supply is an issue nationwide. Last week we had a higher up from MISO come and talk to us, and he said there are issues on the horizon as far as power supply on a national level. So my question was, who's ultimately responsible for managing power supply at a national level? There's not a great answer. They said the states are supposed to do that, but I'm not sure who at the state is supposed to do that. But FERC is involved in everything, right? They're involved in tree trimming and everything we do. PSC is involved in a lot, but nobody's really taking responsibility for when you take 60 generating stations offline of how we're making that up. And to me, that's a little bit of an issue, and nobody's really looking to step forward on that. But we're seeing some pinches in spots in the country. We're fortunate enough this year in our Midwest area that we didn't have that, but California's seeing it. Texas is seeing it. There's parts of the country that are being asked to conserve, and because the supply is not there to meet demand. So it's an issue moving forward, and there have to be some evaluation and some soul searching about how we're going to be producing electricity as a nation. There's no doubt about it. And in the meantime, what happens? I mean, economics 101, right? Your 101 class back in college, when demand outweighs supply, prices are going up, and that's what we're in the middle of right now. And it's being passed along on your PCAC. I saw mine was at $44 last month or something. So that's what we're living in right now in that environment. So electric's doing good, though. Our electric department this year, we're up over $600,000. Water, I told you would come back. We had just a couple months there. If you go, we're in the negative. We're up $501,000 in the positive now for water. Everybody's watering. Wastewater, we're plus $796,000. We've got a ton of projects to pay for, so that's good news there. So the summary there is we are collecting more in revenues than we're spending in expenses on all three of our major utilities, and they're right in par with where we should be right now. So that's a positive. So that's my financial report.
All right. Utility dashboard.
Yeah, just quickly on the dashboard on page 20, you see that electric AMI meter. Some of you maybe saw that a little bit of a promotion on that. We completed the AMI electric meter installation, so those are done. And we're pretty proud of that. We've got a great team. I also want to thank our policymakers. I mean, you folks initiate, help push that along in the beginning. City Council takes it upon themselves for these types of projects that they're not sexy, right? I mean, these infrastructure projects like that they don't garner a lot of votes usually. Sewer, water, meters. But you stuck your necks out and you supported that, and thank you. And AMI Electric's done, and we're just getting going, about 15% done with water. So I want to hit the hit on that.
And the utility report.
I don't have anything to add to what's in the report. I mean, some of you asked me some questions. Mark already hit on that. Mike Noreen, his thing about there's 81, he outlines in here that there's now 81 different renewable energy installations in River Falls, not including the hydros. And he says, I don't know why I didn't include the hydros. I think why he didn't include the hydros is probably because he's thinking about the newer things. And he said he should be including the hydros because they are part of our renewable energy portfolio. So, but those are popping up. There's salespeople again, door to door, selling solar. Just buyer beware on that. That was all I can say. And next month, you asked me to just talk about how we assist customers and bill pay assistance. We're going to have a little presentation next month on what we do with our customers to help them with bill pay assistance. It's fairly elaborate, so we're going to have a little presentation on that next month. That's all I have.
And
everybody's exhausted?
Lastly, any announcements? You have 30 seconds.
No further announcements.
Bacon Bash this weekend.
Bacon Bash this weekend, yes, out of my purview, but we're doing some temporary electric to help them out, so how about that? Come on down and everything bacon for all weekend long.
High school homecoming game?
What's that?
High school homecoming game?
High school homecoming game is Friday night. The Superior Spartans will be in town. Come on down, support your local high school. That's all I have.
All right, can I get a hero to motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Way to go, Adam.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, you're welcome. See you.